This is Speaking of Pets podcast, where we offer you up-to-date, science-based, accurate information.
Oh, Gizmo! Good kitty. You're such a good kitty.
And they're looking up and howling in unison.
If it affects pets, we'll talk about it. Today's Speaking of Pets podcast is sponsored by Blue Buffalo, the maker of natural pet foods. Love them like family, feed them like family. Blue Buffalo offers wholesome, meat-first recipes with high-quality natural ingredients in flavors dogs and cats love. Discover formulas for all breed sizes, life stages, and lifestyles. And with Blue Buffalo's True Blue Promise, that assures that real meat is the first ingredient, with no poultry byproducts, no corn, wheat, or soy, and no artificial flavors or preservatives. Hey, Janet, have you ever heard of the Morris Animal Foundation?
No, it was new to me until you sent me the link. It's really cool work that they do.
It was founded by Dr. Morris 75 years ago, and it funds research for animals, not only dogs and cats, but tortoises, penguins, to research animal diseases all over the world. It's a fabulous, fabulous foundation. We are lucky enough today to have Dr. Kelly Diehl. Kelly is a board-certified small animal internal medicine specialist. She got her veterinary degree from University of Tennessee, did a year internship at Animal Medical Center out by you in New York City.
Yep.
Then her 3-year residency in small animal medicine at Colorado State, plus a 3-year NIH postdoc fellowship at National Jewish Health. So I can't wait to ask her about that. She joined the staff of the Veterinary Referral Center in Colorado, where she became part owner of the Internal Medicine Service. And she did that for 14 years before deciding she'd like a career in science communications, and that's when she joined the Morris Animal Foundation. Her specialty is in the areas of immunology and gastroenterology, and like I said, she's a board-certified small animal veterinary internal medicine specialist. Lives in Colorado, 2 kids, 2 cats, too many fish, she claims, and also 1 very lovable Labrador retriever. So we can't wait to talk to Dr. Kelly about the Morris Animal Foundation, all the wonderful things they do. And Janet, with you and I owning golden retrievers, they currently have the Dog Aging Project, which features golden retrievers, and also they're looking into the most common cancer in golden retrievers, which is the hemangiosarcoma. That's just 2 of the wonderful things they're doing. So I can't wait to talk to her about all the research projects far and wide all over this world, a great foundation for animals and animal health.
Well, you know what Daddy would say about Dr. Diehl. She's one smart cookie.
Yes, she is. And we love having smart cookies on this show. Well, listen, Dr. Kelly, before we start talking about Morris Animal Foundation, we want to know about this lovable Labrador retriever and the too many fish.
Well, the lovable Labrador is mine, mostly. Of course, we got it, and the kids got her, and they said, oh, we'll help take care of her, but I knew that was never going to happen, right? So Emily is basically my dog, and she is going to be 12 soon, so she's getting up there, but she does great. The fish, it's an interesting story. My daughter, like many kids, brought home a beta, right? Like, I want a beta, right? And we had some little tank that we borrowed from somebody. And then my husband thought that what a good thing would be to go to the Denver Aquarium Society so that they could be better beta owners. Well, the next thing I know, they go to the first meeting and a bag of fish comes home. And then a tank that gets bigger, and then another bag of fish and some plants. And we now have 6 tanks with all different kinds of fish, which I have. This is one time I put my foot down and I said to my husband, this is your hobby. Of course, my daughter, long ago, the beta died. She abandoned the fish. And my husband it's now his project. And I do feed them, I do change their water, but like all the fancy like vacuuming and all of that.
Not your job.
That's not my job. Yeah, not my job.
But I have a question. Does one of those tanks have the requisite scuba diver?
No, ours are very fancy. So they have like real plants, and my husband has artistically put in shells and driftwood and all of that. We did have though a little like sunken chest, the pirate's chest. Yeah, treasure chest in my son's tank in his room. And I use the term son loosely. It's just another place for my husband to store fish in his bedroom.
I often wonder what the fish think about that treasure chest, or they're swimming around the figurine of the diver. Like, what are they thinking about?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's good mental stimulation, though. Because, Janet, when I volunteer at Crow with the wildlife rehab place for the possum and all those turtles and stuff, we change that every other day. We put new branches in, and, so it kind of keeps them going.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know what the fish think. But I will share a story because Emily is very jealous. So we have 2 cats, and she doesn't like when you talk to the cats. Well, the other day, my husband actually was talking to the fish, like, "Oh, little fish, where are you?" That dog came out of no place. Like, "Why are you talking to those weird little water dogs?" Because everything's a dog, right? The cats are just little dogs. Those are the water dogs. And she was very jealous that he was talking to the fish.
He's like going like me.
I did read a study, though, that fish can recognize their owners.
Really?
I bet
they
your husband
really
would
like
agree
him.
to that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. If he walks by, even if he's not feeding them, walks by a tank, yeah, they go right to the front. They totally know. And if they can tell the difference between him and me, because he again is the primary caretaker, and we always say they look at him like he's their deity. So they're like, "Oh, our deity is here to put food and clean our tank."
Kelly,
And when they
that's
see
what
you
need to
coming,
do.
they probably give you the other end.
But Kelly needs to do that with her husband. Look at him like he's a deity.
Deity, right? Exactly.
We'll call him Fish Flake Man, right?
Right, exactly.
Now, Kelly, you lived in Manhattan, right?
I did for a year, and I don't know if you can tell by my accent, but I grew up in Jersey, so not far from Newark.
So you
And
don't pump your own gas.
no,
Ever?
Never. Yeah, there.
Jersey
That was a
Girl
whole
pump
thing.
gas, yeah.
Right. But I then lived in Manhattan when I was at the Animal Medical Center, and of course I knew New York quite well from growing up right outside it. But that was a whole different experience, but really, really fun. Manhattan, I think, is really fun if you have people to play with. And our intern class is big. It was like 22, 23 people. So you always have people to play with.
Oh, good.
And that makes a big difference.
When Kelly sent me her bio, when I was reading it, Kelly, and I made a comment to Kelly, all of us vets, we've really lived all over the United States. You're doing an internship here, externship there, residency here, taking boards here.
Yeah.
You really get to know the country. And then when you're going to your yearly, like me, derm meetings, you internal medicine, you get to see the country that way too, because it's always in a different city. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I moved around quite a bit. I've been in Colorado now, 35 years.
Wow.
So a long time out here. But I was all over the place when I was young.
Well, where is Morris Animal Foundation located? Is that in Colorado?
Yeah, we're based in Denver, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And our Mark Morris Sr. was actually from Colorado.
Okay.
And there's a person who went all over the place because he went to vet school at Cornell, then had a practice in New Jersey, which the first time I walked into Morris Animal Foundation and I saw a picture of his practice, I was like, we took our cats there. Like he had already sold it, but it was the same practice. So, and then of course, Hills is based in Topeka. And I think a lot of people think that's where the foundation is, but we're in Denver.
So, Kelly, I just went to one of the national preserves, and my husband and I got a pass to go into one of the caves. And to get the pass, you had to say that you'd never been in a cave before, and anything you had on, you'd never worn in a cave because of white nose syndrome. So I was telling Alice about it, and she said that you guys are actually doing a study, or funding a study.
We've funded several studies over the years, obviously, especially for our wildlife portfolio. A lot of what we'll study are emerging diseases. We just revived what we call our rapid response fund, which is to be a little bit more nimble to respond to crises. We've done a lot of work after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. We did some work on sea otters when they were dying in California. This is probably 20 years ago, and it turned out to be from toxoplasmosis and kitty litter. And we did something on the gray wolves when they were about to be delisted. However, we have, a call for wildlife proposals and white nose syndrome. We've probably been funding, 10, 11, 12 years now, on and off, depending on what people, but we do have one going on right now that we're very optimistic. They're going to be finishing up, and it's things are looking good for them. So we're excited.
So do these different studies apply for a grant from you all?
Yes. So what we do is we have calls at various times of the year, and they rotate. Typically they're the same time, but they can vary a bit. And our main buckets, if you want to call them that, are cat, dog, wildlife, and equid, which is mostly horses, though we've done donkeys and mules as well. And then we'll have special calls. If we have a donor, for example, we had a gentleman who was really interested in immune-mediated hemolytic anemia, and because he had a dog that had it who survived, which is lucky. It's a terrible disease with a pretty very high mortality rate. And he said, hey, I want to sponsor studies. So we may have something like that. That's a donor inspired. Other times we'll have a special interest. We did one on hemangiosarcoma about a year ago. We're going to do another one in June of 2025, a special call. So we have them rolling. And then the last bucket is for Golden Retriever Lifetime Study data and samples, which is one of a more unusual study for us in that it's in-house, and those we rotate quarterly. So we'll open for a little bit, get proposals, review them, open it again. So that one's a little different than the yearly calls that we typically have.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, I read that you've given out $160 million for 3,000 studies. That is amazing for 25,000 species. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a huge amount, and we just ran the numbers because we usually run them in July, and we have now crossed 167 million and 3,100 studies. So we'll be updating soon because we just ran that. We're like, yay! That's a big huge milestone.
What are your donors like?
All over the place, though the majority, seriously, are people who give us $10, $25. They're not giant donations, but people are really consistent. So we have some donors who've been with us 30 years. We'll hear from them 35 years. So they're all over the country. We do get some donations internationally because we fund internationally. And then we'll have a few big donors here and there. We have some folks who, again, have been with us for quite a long time. And we have a few industry partners, but those are ones we don't have as many with them. It is by far and away, I always go to people, it's my mom. It's my mom given at the end of the year, right? Or she sees an appeal. It's like most of us, right? How we give to charities.
Well, and I think donors don't realize, I'm in the nonprofit world as well, is they'll say, I can only give you $25. And what I say to them is, it's 25 more than I had yesterday. And if 20 people give me 25, it adds up. It's, no gift is too small, and it truly does make a difference no matter what level.
Right, exactly. That 167 million, that's not because somebody gave us 40 million bucks in a pop. No, that is all of those $25, $10. People sometimes remember us in their estate plans.
Yep.
And, we get money that way as well. And many of those folks may have given us, $300-400 in their lifetime, but then a couple thousand come our way, right? After when their estates are settled. So those are all where we get our funds.
That's amazing.
How do you decide which diseases you're going to focus on?
Good question, Alice. Sometimes we decide.
You see the list, it's amazing.
Right. A lot of times we don't, right? The researchers decide for us. Sometimes we'll have what we call an open call. And for years, that was most of our calls, which is come to us with whatever ideas you have, whatever you think is important. Occasionally we will focus because maybe we have a donor. We've tried some targeted, like our last dog call was really for senior dog health. And we were very focused on things like osteoarthritis, cognitive declines. We have some microbiome studies. We have one on periodontal disease. And these are all going to be reviewed in a few weeks. So sometimes we decide, if, for example, we got a nice donation from the Doberman Retriever, Doberman Pinscher Club. And they were like, hey, we want to do something that affects Dobermans, obviously. So we've done some cardiomyopathy work for them. We have one on wobblers right now, which is, again, somebody had a dog with wobblers. And that's a pretty devastating disease, and said, hey, can you help us? And we'll partner with we have one with the Golden Retriever, several with the Golden Retriever Foundation. And sometimes they just give us money and say, go, go find some studies. Often they'll give us money and say, okay, put that toward the Golden Retriever Lifetime Study. But recently they came with us and said, can we work together to fund a big study they had already identified, but they just wanted us to come together. And that's a lymphoma study that's going to occur at University of Minnesota. So all different ways, different ways we may find studies. So it's not always targeted at a particular disease, but can be all over the board.
So some of it's unrestricted funding.
Yeah, a lot of it. In fact, we often prefer that. I mean, I'll say that we're all in the nonprofit world. Sometimes when it's restricted, that can be harder for us,
Yes.
But we get it. But most of our funding is unrestricted.
So do you have a panel who decides on where that unrestricted funding is going to go? They must be, veterinarians or some kind of animal.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of say, okay, here's the pot of money we're going to spend every year on these different, right? And then what we do to kind of take some of the burden off of us, and also to make sure it's not our agenda, and we also can't be experts in everything. We convene panels for every one of our calls. We'll go out, we'll find experts, we get these proposals sent to us. We screen them for what we call guideline deviations, right? Like you can't, you got to be succinct. We don't want to tome, right? And so we'll do that, screen that first. And then we convene these folks. And it can be, maybe as small as 5 or 6 people. If it's a single or 2 grants, typically there are about 10 people.
Wow.
And they divide them up, and we have 2 people per grant, and they read them. And then at a meeting, that all we do is facilitate, and our only job is to sit and answer questions that have to do with procedure, but we don't interfere or talk about the proposals themselves. They tell us, the people will present, they'll say, here's the pros and cons. They have a scoring rubric. They present it to the rest of the group, and then everyone votes. And they give it a score, and then we rank them. So we have like a cutoff, and we'll say, okay, these are recommended for funding. Then they'll rank them, because every time, it is rare for us to have more money than we have studies, right? So they'll rank them, and then sometimes our fundraising team will go out and beat the bushes, because maybe that's a study that they know someone will contribute to. If we run, let's say, typically, I will honestly say we tend to have more cat money than we often have cat proposals. So we might shift money around, right? We may say, well, let's put some in wildlife, or let's divide it up. So that's how we figure out where the money goes, but we never tell our reviewers, dink it because the budget, unless they think the budget isn't appropriate. We're like, we'll figure it out. But we have some guidelines on budget, that we've had some pretty big dollar studies occasionally, and sometimes multi-year, right? So, but by having the experts there in the room, it takes pressure off of us, and it also, we feel our biases don't get in there, right? And I think it preserves the integrity of the process to do it that way.
Well, and it gives your donors confidence in the money they're giving you.
Right. You're trying to be good stewards, right? So how can we be the best stewards? Well, picking the best science, and you need experts to do that for you.
What's the most interesting study you all have invested in? I'm sure there are lots.
There are
I don't know how you
lots.
do it. Yeah.
I would say, if I had to pick, I think the most fascinating study is the one we're doing right now with the golden retrievers, which has been a big lift for us. I just talked to you about our process, and we never typically run a study. We've never really done that. But for the golden retriever lifetime study, we are actually managing that in-house. So we do the data collection, we facilitate. It is going to be, when it's done, a $33 million study.
Oh my.
So that's a huge chunk of change for us. And it's different, right? We manage it. We provide samples for free to researchers. So we've picked up the cost of collecting and storing the samples. All they have to do is give us a proposal. We screen the proposals. And again, we have a scientific steering committee for the study. So they look at them and they're like, yes, this is a good use of sample. Or no, we're not sure. Or too much. We can't afford to send these. That's too much sample. And we've tried to help facilitate. Sometimes we have funding that we can help with looking at this data. The other thing we've allowed people to do is go through our regular grant cycle, ask for money to do the data part of it, right? So it just falls under the regular cycle. And we have a lot of unique studies. So we have these little sub-studies, and those are being done, right, at different universities. But whatever we can do, we just did genetic sequencing on dogs, which is becoming all the rage.
Right.
And we know that sequencing costs are just amazingly, I wouldn't say cheap, but they're much. I mean, they used to be like $1 million a dog, right? It's now like $1,000. You can get the full genome of a dog. And what we did is we were able to get funding from, if you guys know, the V Foundation for Cancer Research. It's a human cancer group. They gave us some money a couple years ago, and we put it all towards genotyping the dogs, and then we're making that data available free to researchers. So they don't have to pay for it. They don't have to do that. They just come to us and we can give them the information, because the idea is, can we facilitate discovery that will not only, I always think of it as these concentric circles. Like in the very center, it's this information will help golden retrievers.
Right.
And then the next circle is dogs. And then the next circle is other species. And then outside is humans, right? Like, can we find data from the study that will impact health for all these other species, including people?
Wow.
I was so glad to see that you're doing research with hemangiosarcoma, because I think every one of us knows an owner that's had a dog, or we've had personal dogs that have died from hemangiosarcomas. And it's such, especially Goldens, you know how they hide things from you. You never knew anything was wrong with them, and then they go in the backyard to pee and they fall over dead because the tumor is ruptured. I was so glad to see that you had grants toward that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That part of what prompted us to do that hemangiosarcoma initiative. So the first call in 2023, just canine hemangiosarcoma, was because we found, it's not a surprise that golden retrievers have a high cancer incidence, right? That's why we did the study. The study at its heart is actually a cancer risk study. It's morphing a little bit, and we can talk about that. But a huge percentage of our dogs, and I'm going to get this backwards because I always get it backwards. I think 70% of our dogs, or 75% have died of cancer, or 70%, and of those, 70 or 75% are hemangiosarcoma. So we thought it's double the number of dogs we have with lymphoma. We thought lymphoma would be, or they'd be even, right? Not at all. Hemangiosarcoma is way outstripping lymphoma in our study group. And because of that, we thought, okay, maybe we should raise funds around this because we have so many dogs and all this data and samples that have been collected maybe for years before they develop the disease. And we want to get that out the door. So we raised funds for hemangiosarcoma. We encouraged people to use the girls. Oh, sorry, that's an acronym I'm not supposed to use, but we always call it girls. Golden Retriever Lifetime Study. But we didn't require it. And we got like kind of a 50-50 split, right? We have some people using samples and data. Some people are like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to use my own stuff. If you guys know, the University of Minnesota has a really big emphasis on hemangiosarcoma. They are doing stuff with their samples, but we're helping fund that. And we are going to have another call, like I said, in June 2025 for, again, only focused on canine hemangiosarcoma because it's such a huge problem. I agree. We've all seen it. And when I was in practice, what was really would make me sad is I could see somebody for something else.
Yeah.
And 6-7 weeks later, their dog's bleeding out. And the question is always like, how did you not see this?
Yeah.
6-7 weeks ago. And I have evidence, like I remember ultrasounding at least 2 dogs that 6 weeks later, I'm like, I didn't see anything.
Right.
Because we were looking for something else or something going on. Because that's a question we get a lot from our participants. They're like, should I ultrasound my dog every couple of months? And the answer is we don't even know if that's going to be helpful.
I did
But
that
did you do it?
with my cinnamon golden, who was actually part of the aging. She's passed away now, but she had she had 5 different cancers. She had thyroid sarcoma, adenocarcinoma of her intestine, and then the last one came up suddenly because I had her ultrasounded every 4 months. It was a retroperitoneal kidney mass that was small enough that we would have gone in for surgery, but she ended up bleeding out. So I don't even know what that was.
Right.
They're very sneaky, these tumors.
They're really sneaky, and hemangiosarcoma is tough. The other thing that's interesting that we were finding, because we asked people to go get a necropsy, a post-mortem examination done. And people are wonderful about it because I know how I feel when I lose a pet. I'm not sure that I'm always up for that, but we've got a lot of people who are like, okay, I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to do this. And we found a much higher incidence of histiocytic sarcoma, which is another cancer, which we always go as, sure, we see it in Goldens and we see it in other breeds. But we think that we're finding a lot of those because we ask for a necropsy, and those can look like hemangiosarcoma, right? So if I was in practice, somebody loses their dog, I go, it's probably hemangiosarcoma, right? And I don't push them to do anything more because we ask. And so we think that there are probably more of those cases in Goldens than we suspected as well. And it's actually our 3rd most common cancer, which we did not expect in the cohort at all with that. So it's that is interesting. The other thing that we talked about, we always go cancer risk, it's a cancer risk study, but we're realizing it's also an aging study because now we have these dogs getting older, and a few years ago we added some stuff for our poor participants to do. We're like, oh, and by the way, can you answer these extra questionnaires on osteoarthritis and cognitive changes, right? We kind of smashed that on and said, hey, can you tell us about it? Because cancer is kind of a disease of aging, right? Most cancers are older dogs, and we wanted this other information. We also did this interesting project a few years ago where we went to our study participants, because you got one golden, you usually got more goldens.
True.
Some of them had older goldens, and we said, hey, we called it the golden oldies, and we said, if you have a dog that has never had cancer and is over the age of 12, would you mind giving us a blood sample, a couple blood samples, because we want to bank that. it allowed us to start comparing dogs with and without cancer
Great
earlier.
idea.
Because otherwise we got to wait. We also made that data available for free to researchers. So we're like, okay, we got all these Goldens. They're older. They have no cancer. Because with our cohort, they're still going, and we were like, are we going to wait till they all pass away? Well, that could take years, and we want a comparison group now, or somebody, like if researchers come to us, we're like, hey, we have this comparison group. Would you like some of their sample? We have had our first teenagers, in the studies. We got our first couple they're in their teens, but it's a tough time. Our average age is about 11 and a half years. And for those of you who know Goldens, that's a really prime time for them to get cancer.
Yep.
And it's cancer, more than we expected, seriously more than we expected.
You know, when I was in practice, I did derm, but I did general practice for a while. A lot of pet owners, a lot of Golden owners would tell me they lost theirs at age 8. They said, oh, I'm so glad we got him past the age of 8. And I never really thought about that because, knock on wood, mine have lived to 14, 15, but then I'm getting them ultrasounded every 4 months. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But for some reason, 8 years of age, and same with English Bulldogs. I noticed that as well.
Blue Buffalo natural veterinary diets offer a natural alternative in nutritional therapy. With their in-house research and development team with over 300 years experience in well pet and veterinary therapeutic diets, more than 600 scientific publications, and more than 50 U.S. patents. Blue Buffalo natural veterinary diets.
Hey everyone, don't forget to pick up Country Critter Journal if you live in Northeast Ohio. It's a must-read for all pet lovers. Their goal is similar to ours here at the podcast, to educate the community on taking care of pets. They're advocates for adopting from shelters, not puppy mills, and they connect our local communities with goods, services, kennels, and those seeking to adopt a pet. They're a hometown paper with a personal touch. A must-read for all pet lovers, Country Critter Journal. To get on a happier note, tell us about Betty White.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Betty. Betty, I'm going to work hard to get this right. We miss Betty a lot. Yeah. And that rapid wildlife study, that fund we had, Betty started it. Uh-huh. So that was sort of Betty's deal when she was on the board. And there's a couple legends surrounding Betty, how she found Morris. But the one I like, as the person who writes the newsletter, is that she saw a newsletter that somebody had. It was like the late 1960s. Betty wasn't to the Mary Tyler Moore show yet, right? So she's like in between jobs or whatever. And she sees the newsletter, her friend gives it to her, and she said, oh, this seems like an interesting organization. And she was really right into animals, period. Right. And so she found us, and then people quickly got her involved. And at one point, so she's done with Golden Girls. She had made some stuff in the 90s. She was the president for a while of the organization. She did a lot of fundraising and did so much for us. She slowed down the last few years of her life, but was still, a more supportive. Like, we have clips of her. She was so wonderful. She would go on a show, and I'm sure her advance team said, she would be like, ask me about my charities. And she always mentioned Morris out there. And that you can't, was marvelous of her to do. I actually met Betty, totally different circumstances though. I think she was in town for a foundation meeting in the early, I think it was 1999, 2000. And I don't know how we suckered her into doing this, but I was we had a big practice here in Denver, and I was part of internal medicine. Somehow we got her to come to the practice, which we had just opened a new building. So we were taking pictures of Betty in the building, and I got to meet her, and she's a super nice lady. She's quite small. She was quite small. Very small lady, but very, very nice. And I got to meet her and chat with her for a few minutes, and she was very interested. I think she was very excited about women coming into the profession and there being a lot of women in it. And she was super gracious, talked to me about what I did. And then it was several years later that I came to the foundation. She was still alive, but at that point she wasn't traveling out to our meetings as much anymore. But she left a big legacy for us. I think you can't underestimate how much she did just by Betty being on a television show and throwing her name out there.
Yeah.
Right? That really, means a lot. And again, we were so lucky to know her. She's such a wonderful person. A lot of people have just great stories of her. We have pictures of her on the wall. There's an insane picture. I will tell all of you need to go look. It was from the 1970s.
Okay.
And it's Mark Morse Sr., who is quite probably in his 80s. Maybe it was the early odds. Mark Morse Jr. wearing, I kid you not, a brocade floral coat, like jacket, that looks like he made it from draperies. It's just really funny, like so weird. And she's wearing like some weird, like one of those old peekaboo kind of blouses, and she's got a dog, and they're all she's got a little poodle, and they're all standing together and they're smiling. And it's one of my favorite pictures because they are all clearly enjoying each other. The outfits are hysterical because Dr. Mark Morse Sr., being from Colorado, like a bolo tie will serve for everything. So he's wearing like the bolo tie and a very conservative suit. His son's wearing this crazy floral plant, and then Betty and her peekaboo blouse in the middle with her poodle. But it's just, I love the picture every time I see it. I wish it was in color. We don't have it in color, which
shame.
I think would be so much better. But it is a great picture, and again, she really poured her heart into so much here.
You mentioned about having sometimes more money than you need for cats, but I was reading about some sort of biomarkers for heart disease in cats. How's that going?
It's going pretty well. The other thing that I can say that's interesting is we're partnering with Every Cat Foundation, which used to be WIN for people who remember WIN. It's now Every Cat. And we are going to we've got a huge consortium of scientists led by Dr. Greg Dean at Colorado State University, who are going to Cyprus to study that weird FIP sort of disease that broke out last year.
What's
that
FIP? Feline something?
Feline infectious peritonitis. And if you guys saw in Cyprus, all these cats, and it's been all over the place, how many have actually died. But FIP, it's usually not that easily transmissible. And like viruses are wont to do, they figured out that the FIP, like the feline coronavirus or FIP, a mutant hooked into canine coronavirus, made a whole new virus that's now transmissible in the feces, because it's not how we typically think about FIP. It's a mutated form of the common feline intestinal coronavirus. So some like Frankenstein weird virus, and understandably, because it's coronavirus, and this is like a deadly virus in most circumstances, right? Like this is causing a lot of concern. So we made a partnership because people came to us. Some researchers came to us and said, "Hey, you're Morris. Can you help us? We need to get some boots on the ground." They go to Every Cat. We talk together. We sent out a call, but so this is one of those unusual calls that I talked about, where we kind of commissioned people almost and from people we knew were experts in the field, and they've got this huge collection of international scientists now that are going to study the outbreak and try to figure out what's going on. And it has some implications not only for the cats in Cyprus, but if this is going to be some crazy new FIP that's more easily transmissible, like how do you treat it? How do you find it? People in Cyprus were using some medications that were used, not Pavloxid, though one of the studies hopes to look at that, but some of those antivirals they used in people for COVID, and with a variable success, though it seems like maybe it worked. But they're studying that whole mess to try to tease this out, because not just does it have implication for cats, right? But it could have some significance. I mean, if their coronaviruses reconnecting with each other to make them more virulent, that could be something we could be staring down, right, as people, who knows when. So we're really excited about it. We're actually going to probably specifically fundraise around that soon. So stay tuned. It's coming.
Isn't that odd that on one island like that, it would be so mutated?
I know, and it's weird that it happened, but it's got to start somewhere, right? And the thing is, thank goodness it was maybe on this island, but that's what they're trying to sort out. Like, was there something about the conditions here other than in Cyprus? They have a huge community cat population. So I wouldn't call them feral. These are cats that just roam around. People feed them. You've got all these cats having kittens in an area. I mean, I guess we're lucky. Maybe it started on an island.
So Kelly, what's your website? Because we'll put that up on the screen so that if people want to give, they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Morris Animal Foundation, one word, all lowercase.org. And you can see a little bit about what we've done. We have some historical stuff. You can see the wonderful picture. Dr. Mark Morrissey.
It's a wonderful website. It really is. I was looking at it yesterday. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, I noticed that there's a lot of comparative studies between dogs with osteosarcoma and what information we're gaining from that to use in humans with osteosarc.
Right. And that was something, we did our first osteosarcoma initiative back in 2015, 2016. And they're roughly, people bandy about the number, I've seen it for years, right? 10,000 dogs a year get osteosarcoma. Is very similar to pediatric osteosarcoma, which people go like maybe 800 kids a year get that, but it's bad, right? This is the kid who's in the soccer field who breaks a leg as they're running, and they've got osteosarcoma, and it behaves, it metastasizes very quickly. I had a client actually. This is a sad story. She was an osteosarcoma patient. She was 16. And she had this kitten that she got to be like a companion. And this kitten developed a blockage, like a urinary blockage. And they ended up, it's tiny, right? Ripped its urethra, ended up losing a kidney. We got the urethra straightened out, but we took a kidney out anyway. It was so important to her to have this cat. The cat outlived her, sadly. And I saw it for the rest of my practice time. I said, I will see this cat for free for you, for the family, because we just felt like we should do it. But there was like it meted, and she was having constant surgeries. And I remember her dad said, you know what, it was so hard to watch my 16-year-old sign her own DNR, do not resuscitate order, because she was like, do not resuscitate me. She had reached that level point, lots of chemo. So it's pretty terrible disease for kids, right? It's terrible disease for dogs too. And we did one initiative, we have more coming up. We have a donor who lost a dog to St. Bernard, not a surprise, to osteosarcoma, and she has been just really great in saying, okay, I want to fund this, so she's funding some different studies. One is on, are there strategies for what's called a limb spare, right? Limb sparing was pioneered at CSU, when I was there as a resident, which is a long time ago. And we've done some studies on a lot to do the metastases, right? Because these things spread. Like a lot of dogs can do fine with amputation. It's actually more than people think. I've heard a lot of surgeons say that, right? Or we can do some limb sparing strategies, but it's the mets that kill them. Ultimately, right? Like so many times it's already spread. And so what can we do to deal with the metastases, which is also what kills kids? We have one that's really interesting where they're going in and actually doing metastectomy. So they're actually going in and cutting out metastases out of the lungs.
Really?
laparoscopically. And if you know people who've had cancer, that's not that unusual, right? They'll go in if you have cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not great to have to do it, but they'll at least cut out some big metastases if you have them in your brain, your liver, I've heard in the lungs. And this one is where they're doing it in dogs, partly not just to test, like, does this work, but also to gather tissue to say, are these tumors that end up in the lungs a little different? Is that why they're resistant to treatment sometimes? So it's a really interesting study. We've never funded that I can see one that ever said, we want to go in and try to look at these mets. They're almost like bacteria.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the best, and that's probably inaccurate from a scientific standpoint.
Right.
But
They're always
don't
changing.
always,
Yeah.
they're always changing. And if you don't kill all the cells,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like there's a
Right.
couple different things. One is we have had some studies where they are looking at what's called minimal residual disease, right? Where they try to figure out we had a couple studies from NC State where they were trying to figure out, like, can we tell if we got it all? Right? Because if you leave a few cells behind, they can come back. Now that's different than, we evaded it because we got all these funky strategies, right, to avoid chemotherapy. We can hide from the immune system. I mean, cancers are very adaptable. They're us, right? I mean, they're actually us. They're not invading bacteria, but they're avoiding the immune system in all kinds of interesting ways. Like, don't look here.
Yeah.
We're just you. We just look a little different, right? And because our immune system, if properly stimulated, and that's where a lot of the cancer vaccines, like we've funded some studies, right, that are trying to, we did one with listeria. So Nicola Mason, she's on, she did a 60-minute show even about it, because what they tried to do is hook a piece of, they know that osteosarcoma has a certain molecule on its surface, right, and it has more of cancer has more than normal cells. So they developed an antibody that bound to that thing on the surface. But their special little molecule also had a little bit of listeria. So the body would go, oh, look, you got listeria over here, and we're going to kill this thing and hopefully kill the tumor. And it had some variable success. So she was excited because it did, like, there were some dogs who responded really well. And other dogs were like, listeria. But if she saw dogs actually like spike fevers and get sick, it actually was a good sign. It meant their body was like recognizing something was odd, and they went for it. So we're seeing some of those studies too. Like, can we somehow make this attractive?
Well, Kelly, I'm going to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests. And do you know what that question is?
I know what it is.
Oh, good. Okay. Some people cheat. What is your pet or human peeve?
I think what makes me nuts is I have 2 teenagers. Well, my daughter just turned 20. Like, they will clean their like, they'll be clean if they're at my mother's house or something, but they leave food around
All the time.
all the time. They're like petri dish experiments. Like, my son will come down with like 5 cups. I'll be like, oh, there's where all those cups and mugs went, and there's like stuff growing
There's
in
like
them.
mold in there.
Yeah, there's like mold in them, and he just leaves them. And then I said, hey, just could you rinse them out? And then I find mold in the drain,
Yeah.
like the big mold thing. I'm like, dude, like, then you got to clean out the drain. And what really peeved me was when I went to visit my daughter, who has her own apartment at college. Clean. Clean. So clean. And I'm like, what? You can't. And then she came home for the summer. And I'm like, I've seen your apartment. Why is it changed?
Oh, Kelly, you do such good work. Thank you. For
I'm
making a
excited
difference
about
in our
this.
world.
I really am. I think this is
Amazing.
I obviously have heard of the foundation, but then when I was on your website reading about it, and then after talking to you, this is like groundbreaking, the stuff you're doing. And I love that it's all over the world and every species: penguins, goats, donkeys. I mean, it's not just, I love my dogs and cats. it's everybody. That you're
Right,
looking at.
exactly. And I think that's what people don't know. I mean, we've been around for 75 years, and it's been we fund internationally. We have a new fellowship for underserved communities and individuals that we have a donor who's funding that. So we have some people, some in the United States, but again, we're excited. We've got, for the first time, a lot of studies, I think a good amount of studies in Africa, like in Kenya, in South Africa, we've done multiple times, but Nigeria, which is new for us, so we're really excited about some of those. There's a peeve of mine. It is amazing how long we've been around, and I give the people don't even know about us. But I think you're a big fish in our pond, but you're not a big fish when you're talking about some of the big human disease focused charities. But we plug along.
Yeah.
We plug away.
And the thing about a charity is you can't push everyone's button. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, it's a personal thing when people give, and what I appreciate is that you really vet these organizations, these studies that you give to.
Oh yeah, I think that's wonderful.
Super important for
Yeah.
a donor.
Yeah,
And Janet, it's not all cancer. I mean, they do like incontinence in spayed female dogs. I mean, that can make a pet be relinquished to a shelter. So
Right. We've done behavior studies. We
Yeah.
have one. I'll end on one of the most unique ones. It's a hemangiosarcoma one, and it is a dog sniffer study. So you've probably heard about dogs being able to sniff disease.
Yes.
And this is coming out of University of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And they are going to see if dogs can sniff hemangiosarcoma and tell it from other diseases. If they can do it, it's not like every lab's going to have a dog sitting there.
Right.
But what they said is then that means that there are volatile organic compounds or something, right, that is detectable, and then they can start looking for that and make a test for it.
I'm sure
and
they
they're,
can do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure they can smell.
I had a really good client. She had Eskimos, saw her for years. And she came in one time, and it's almost like one of those, like, you've had these clients, right? She's like, my other dog is sniffing her butt, and I think there's something wrong. And there's zero signs.
Yeah.
And
But that's
only because, like, this was a really good client of mine, and I'm looking at the dog, and the dog's like, woo, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll just slap the ultrasound probe on the abdomen really fast. That dog had transitional cell carcinoma in its bladder, and it was small, but we were able to do something. And I was like, I told this lady, I knew her really well. I knew she wouldn't make this up. And I was like, okay, but if I hadn't known her, I would have been she had blood work done. They had a urinalysis done that had been clean. Wow. And I said, well, why don't I just put the probe on it? And by God, there was a little tumor there and that other dog. And so that was a valuable lesson. So I am confident, I think, that they will find something.
Oh, I think so.
Now, whether they can tease it out, that's going to be tough. And sniffing dogs adds a layer of complexity to the sniffing versus like an explosive device. Right. Or a human sample. Like this same group taught dogs to sniff COVID. We're working on it in people. But boy, you put dogs in there, then you're like, dogs sniffing dogs, are they going to be like distracted? But we'll see.
Kelly, this has been an absolute joy.
Oh yeah, we love it.
It's been so fun.
Yes.
This has been so fun, you guys.
I'm so glad you agreed to do the show. This has been so enjoyable.
Well, yeah, we'll have to do it again because this was so much fun. Because
we
appreciate you guys.
Because there's a lot of good stuff going on out there.
And we didn't even talk about a fifth of what they're doing. So we got to do it again.
So Kelly, thank you. It's been a
Yes.
pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank
It was
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks again for having me on.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you, Kelly.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, Janet, this has been so much fun. We learned so much about the Morris Animal Foundation. And please visit their website, morrisanimalfoundation.org. It's a wonderful website. You'll learn so much about ongoing research, where you can donate, just all the diseases you can think of, they're working on. And I can't thank them enough for that. And it's worldwide, remember. It's not just the United States, not just one country. It's everywhere.
Right. And some of their tests are tied to humans, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
That was
Listen,
great.
Janet, I think we're going to wind it up. So this is Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeroman.
And Janet Novotny King, the Novotny sisters from Cleveland, Ohio, saying goodbye and thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow us because we like to hear from you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in today. We hope you learned some valuable information about making decisions about your pet's health.
And don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe on podcasts because we love to have those likes. Thanks so much for listening.
That's actually really good. You could both go bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
How about woof woof?